What do you call a dog magician? A labracadabrador. The anime begins by showing a second-year high school boy named Seiichi. Seiichi is a geeky student who looks ugly and has a bad body odor. That's why he is often shunned and ostracized by his friends. He also often receives unpleasant treatment from his classmates, and often called a pig by his friends. That day during break time, Seiichi was lying on his desk while his friends were talking to each other. Suddenly, the class speaker lit up and gave an unusual announcement. A man's voice can be heard through the speaker claiming that he is a god. The god said that he would take all students to a fantasy world, or commonly known as isekai. The god also said that the students who joined into one group would be taken to a safer place. Seiichi, who has no friends, looks unmotivated and just sits alone at the back table, because none of his friends in his class is willing to join him. Shortly after, Seiichi and all the students in his class suddenly disappeared into the fantasy world. Seiichi, who is alone, is sent to a different part of the fantasy world of his classmates. Seiichi arrived in the middle of the wilderness with no friends at all. After a few days of living in the fantasy world, Seiichi began to feel hungry and thirsty, so he decided to eat whatever he found in the forest. Just as he was starting to feel weak from eating live insects and poisonous mushrooms, a coconut-like fruit suddenly appeared in front of him. Seiichi, who was still feeling hungry, ended up eating it even though the taste of the fruit wasn't that great. Seiichi does not know that the fruit is an evolutionary fruit that can make anyone who eats it change himself to have new abilities. After getting enough energy from the fruit, Seiichi then walked around the forest to gather food again. After a while, Seiichi found a group of gorillas collecting evolution fruits. He then stole the evolution fruit and immediately ate it while all the gorillas were away. Meanwhile, the other students arrived at a courtyard in an academy hall. They started looking for members of their group and conversing with each other. Seiichi, who was comfortably enjoying the stolen evolution fruit, was suddenly surprised by the arrival of the group of gorillas who had previously collected the evolution fruit. All the gorillas looked angry and prepared to attack him. Seiichi, who was currently still at a lower power level, couldn't defeat the group of gorillas and fell unconscious instantly. But when the gorillas approached his body, they were immediately knocked down by the pungent smell emanating from Seiichi's body. After successfully defeating the gorilla, Seiichi managed to get some items and fruit that could give him new skills. Seiichi, who still didn't know anything, greedily ate the whole fruit until it was gone. Within seconds, his body began to undergo changes that made him look more handsome and have a fit body. Now his strength began to rise to a higher level than before. Moments later, a red giant gorilla with a higher power level than Seiichi appeared and invited him to fight. But Seiichi refused the invitation, because he knew that the giant gorilla was stronger than him. The giant gorilla, who called herself as Saria, ignored Seiichi's refusal and immediately hit his body until he was thrown far away. Despite being repeatedly hit by the giant gorilla, Seiichi still managed to survive and didn't suffer any injuries. Seiichi didn't even look scared at all by Saria's strength until Saria started to feel amazed by Seiichi's courage. Seiichi then started to act quickly by expending all his skills, but Saria was still invincible. In the end, Seiichi used a stinging stance from his body in hopes that Saria would fall like the previous gorillas. Unexpectedly, Saria likes the scent of Seiichi's body and begins to fall in love with him. Saria decides to take Seiichi to her residence and invites him to get married. However, Seiichi clearly refused the invitation and was annoyed with Saria's behavior and treatment. Saria, who falls in love with Seiichi, tries to take care of him by cooking food and making clothes for him. Seiichi, who can't stand Saria, who keeps forcing him to get married, decides to run away from Saria's place. Unfortunately, he met a giant spider monster in the middle of the journey. Luckily, Saria arrived on time and managed to save him from the spider monster's attack. Meanwhile, other students in the hall began to gather and were ordered to learn to use the sword for the battle they would face later. The next day, Seiichi again decides to run away from Saria's place until he finds a mysterious cave. Saria, who chased Seiichi from behind, tried to warn him not to enter the cave, but Seiichi had already entered the cave. Arriving in the cave, Seiichi met a skull monster named Xenos, who was previously a noble. When Xenos was about to stab the sword into Seiichi's body, Saria quickly blocked Xenos and sacrificed herself for Seiichi's sake. Due to the stab of the sword, Saria died instantly. Seiichi, who saw Saria fall before him, began to feel sorry for all the bad behavior towards her. He then avenges Saria by killing Xenos. Seiichi cries for Saria's death and kisses her as an apology. A miracle happened. Saria returned to life and turned into a beautiful red-haired girl. After successfully defeating Xenos, Seiichi got several items that could increase his skill and power level. A few seconds later, a little lamb named Edward appeared and said that Seiichi was the first to complete the dungeon quest, so he and Saria would get some gifts from Edward. After that, Seiichi and Saria decided to go to a nearby town to join a guild. On the way, they met a bubble monster with a fairly high level, but Seiichi could crush the monster easily with his sword. After defeating the high-level monster, Seiichi again got an item to improve his skills. He also received a black cloak that could help him hide his powers from strangers. When Seiichi and Saria arrived in a city, Seiichi found that the guild in the city was not the one he expected. The guild in the city is filled with selfish and perverted men, so he intends to leave that place. But one of the guild members named Gussel had already seen it and immediately invited Seiichi and Saria to join. In that place, they also meet a violent girl named Elise. Since Saria didn't mind joining the guild and Seiichi had to find another classmate soon, they decided to join it. After that, Elise asked Seiichi and Saria to take an exam that would be used to test their skills. The exam will be guided by a white-haired girl named Altria. Saria's first test is to help take care of the children in an orphanage. Meanwhile, Seiichi's first test was to dismantle the ruins of an old building together with Altria. While on a mission with Altria, she tells a little about herself. Altria has often been dubbed the bringer of disaster because she always brings bad luck to those around her. That's why she spends most of her time alone. When Seiichi was in the old building, suddenly the building collapsed and hit his entire body. Seeing this, Altria was worried and immediately helped him out of the ruins. Altria burst into tears and again felt sorry for Seiichi. Fortunately, Seiichi managed to survive the ruins. Altria was relieved and warned Seiichi to be more careful in the future. Meanwhile, the other students who had been practicing swordsmanship for several weeks were still not showing any significant progress. The trainer was disappointed and dissatisfied with the training results because, with such low skills, all students would be easily defeated by the enemy, namely the Demon King. Seeing the slow progress of the students, the trainer wished not to involve all the students from the war. However, the government continues to urge the trainer to include all students. The anime returns to the scene where Seiichi is again tested to train his skills. This time, Seiichi was assigned to take a giant dog for a walk around the garden. He was forced to keep running away from the dog because the dog was still very wild. Meanwhile, Altria and the girl who owned the dog were busy talking to each other without paying any attention to Seiichi. Seiichi and Saria were ordered to find 10 medicinal herbs from the forest and defeat 10 bubble monsters in the final exam. When Seiichi, Saria, and Altria were taking their final exams, they suddenly enter a magic portal that Altria stepped on accidentally. They moved to a castle inhabited by a black dragon monster. As they walked down a corridor, Altria was suddenly separated from Seiichi and Saria. A mummy monster appeared in her corridor and immediately attacked her in an instant. Meanwhile, Seiichi and Saria were still trying to get out of the labyrinth corridor. Shortly after, they came across a chest that forced them to open it. When the chest began to attack them, Seiichi immediately issued Binding Magic move to destroy the chest. After the chest was defeated, Seiichi again received a skill-boosting item. On the other hand, Altria had managed to defeat the mummy monster, even though she was already badly injured. After a long journey, Altria encountered a black dragon monster that ruled the castle. The epic battle between Altria and the black dragon monster was finally unavoidable. Altria had already taken out all her skills, even the ultimate move she took out, but the black dragon monster was still invincible. Just as the black dragon was about to kill her with its burst of flames, Seiichi and Saria arrived just in time and save Altria with Seiichi's protective cloak. After that, Seiichi fought against the Black Dryad monster alone, while Saria was in charge of guarding Altria. Although at first Seiichi was thrown several times by the attack of the Black Dragon monster, after a long battle, Seiichi was finally able to defeat the Black Dragon monster. After successfully defeating the monster, Seiichi gains a new, more powerful cloak, and some rare items that can increase his strength to several higher levels. Seiichi, Saria, and Altria were finally able to return to their city and meet the other guild members. As Altria woke up from her stupor, she felt guilty towards Seiichi and Saria. Altria ran away from their guild headquarters. Seiichi, who understands Altria's feelings, tries to chase her and gives her a lucky ring. The ring serves to dispel the curse of doom that Altria has. Seiichi then encouraged Altria with words of encouragement to calm her. However, a misunderstanding occurred. Altria thought that Seiichi liked her, so she started to act awkward in front of Seiichi. The next day, Seiichi begins to gather information to find his schoolmates. Through the information shared by Elise and Gussel, it is known that in the fantasy world, several kings summon heroes from other worlds to fight the Demon King. Gussel then advised Seiichi to look for additional information in the city library. After reading some books in the library, Seiichi realized that most of his skills were very high-level skills. Instead of being happy, he felt frustrated and overwhelmed by his own strength. In the afternoon, Seiichi looked for food to fill his stomach. He finds a cafe owned by an old man named Node and decides to buy some food at the cafe. After Seiichi tells about Altria, who is starting to like him, Node and a cafe customer named Ranz suggest he marry Altria immediately. Seiichi, who was still confused, subconsciously walked towards the orphanage where Saria was. Coincidentally, Altria came to the place and expressed her love for Seiichi. When Saria saw Seiichi kissing Altria, she told Seiichi to accept Altria's love instead of feeling jealous. Since then, Seiichi and Altria were finally officially dating. The next day, Gussel told Seiichi to look for a horse, because every adventurer is required to have a horse to help their journey later. Seiichi then went to a horse shop that Gussel had told him about. The horse shop owner offered every horse in his stable, from the most challenging horse to the dumbest horse. However, none of the horses caught Seiichi's attention, until finally he found a red horse that looked very wild named Lulun. Seiichi managed to tame the wild horse with his skills and brought Lulun home with him. Seiichi meets two teenagers named May and Clay, who make him participate in a local horse race on the way home. When the day of the race came, Saria and Altria came to cheer for Lulun. Seiichi and Lulun are trying to win 5th place because they are aiming for the prize of tamburi, which is a very delicious type of fish dish. But unexpectedly, they managed to win the 1st place. Because Lulun had eaten some of Seiichi's evolution fruits. Lulun, who was sad because she didn't win the tamburi, comforted and encouraged by Seiichi. Unsurprisingly, Lulu turned into a beautiful girl. Altria, who felt jealous of Seiichi together with a beautiful girl, immediately hit Seiichi's face. But after Saria explained that the girl was Lulun, Altria started to believe in him. The next day, members of the Knights of the Wilbur Kingdom named Lorna and Claudia came to see Seiichi and took him away to the palace. Elsewhere, the commanders of the demon army were having a meeting with the daughter of their leader named Lucia. The meeting was attended by Leia Farza as commander of Troop 3, Zorua as commander of Troop 2, Zelos as commander of Troop 1, Jane as commander of law enforcement, Eurus as commander of Troop 5, Leorita as commander of Troop 4, and Christ as Aid Devil's King. Lucia proposed that their troops ally with the Wilbert Kingdom. Even though several commanders opposed the decision, Lucia still insisted on cooperating with the Wilbert Kingdom. Christ was the one who objected and most opposed the decision. On the other hand, Seiichi, who had arrived at the Wilbert Kingdom, was asked to practice fighting with the Wilbert royal princess named Louise. Louise quickly attacked Seiichi with her sword. Even though Seiichi wasn't ready yet, fortunately, Seiichi managed to dodge and counterattack Louise. Seiichi finally managed to beat Louise, and thanks to that victory, Louise called Seiichi a teacher. The other knights looked both surprised and amazed at Seiichi's prowess. On the next day, Seiichi again proves himself by saving King Wilbert from the attack of an intruder who is still 8 years old named Auriga. After successfully defeating Auriga, Seiichi handed her over to the royal knights. Seiichi then helps the knights to heal King Wilbert, who has been cursed by Auriga's knife. It turned out that the king of Wilbert was a man Seiichi had met before at Node's cafe named Ranz. The commander of the Wilburg army named Florio works with Seiichi to create reversal magic that can heal the king of Wilburg. After trying their best, Seiichi and Florio finally managed to heal King Wilburg. The king felt very grateful to Seiichi and intended to give him a gift. However, Seiichi refused the offer and asked to be allowed to become a war teacher from Princess Louise. Elsewhere, the king and war commander of the Kaiser Kingdom misunderstood King Wilburg. They thought that King Wilbert betrayed them by allying with the Demon King's army. That's why King Kaiser sent Auriga to kill King Wilburg. Even though the party that initiated the alliance was not King Wilburg, but the Demon King's army, and the Wilburg Kingdom had also rejected the alliance's invitation. The scene changes to the moment where the knights of the Wilburg Kingdom are interrogating Auriga. Princess Louise, who was also interrogating Auriga, realized something wrong with her. Princess Louise later discovers that Auriga is actually being controlled by someone else, through the slave necklace. Anyone who wears the slave necklace of King Kaiser will surely obey and carry out all of King Kaiser's orders. Luckily, Seiichi could remove the slave necklace from Auriga's neck with his magic power. After Auriga was freed from the necklace's ties, she suddenly burst into tears because she was happy to have been freed from King Kaiser's cruel slavery. She explains that the half-cat humans living in the Kaiser Kingdom will be treated as slaves and trained to become assassins. Seiichi feels sympathy for Auriga and promises to protect her like his own little sister. On the other hand, the demon lords seem to be planning something with Christ. It turned out that they had been conspiring to dominate other kingdoms by sending magic monsters. But all of that was hampered by Lucia's desire to be friends with the Wilburg Kingdom. Meanwhile, Seiichi, Saria, and Altria, who were practicing magic with Florio, were suddenly surprised by the arrival of Princess Louise. Princess Louise orders Seiichi to look after King Wilburg for a while, until she returns from the battle against monsters in the border area. Seiichi complied with Princess Louise's orders and promised to protect King Ranz. Over time, Seiichi, who continued to practice his magic skills, managed to master magic control moves more steadily. Due to this increase, Seiichi again obtained a new skill enhancement item called Eternal Hell. One day the kingdom of Wilburg was visited by an old hermit named Barnabas. Barnabas was a very famous magic teacher and was admired by many heroes for his magical prowess. Barnabas, who was once the teacher of King Ranz, is currently running a magic academy called Barbador. Barnabas reports to King Wilbur that Barbador is currently in turmoil since a hero has come from another world. Here, Seiichi still doesn't realize that the heroes from another world that Barnabas is referring to are his schoolmates. Apart from reporting about it, Barnabas also informed King Wilbur that more than 5,000 monsters would soon attack the Wilburg Kingdom. On the other hand, Princess Louise and the knights and other war troops had arrived at the border area. They didn't expect so many monsters to invade their kingdom's territory. Princess Louise and the knights and her army of war immediately fought against the monsters. Elsewhere, Christ was looking at the prophecy ball while laughing evilly. It turned out that it was Christ and the demon lord who had sent all the monsters to the territory of the Wilburg Kingdom. Meanwhile, Seiichi and the rest of his friends were already preparing at the Wilburg Royal Castle to fight the other monsters sent by the Demon King. Saria, Altria, and Lulun joined the other guild members to fight the monster army with their skills. The battle lasted quite a long time and was fierce because the number of monsters they had to fight was very large. Barnabas, standing on top of the fort, was assisting King Wilburg's army with his magic power. As a result, the 5,000 monsters that previously attacked the Wilburg Kingdom were successfully eliminated. Unfortunately, there were still 10,000 monster troops from the direction of the forest that belonged to the king class. Feeling cornered, Seiichi has a brilliant idea to get rid of the monsters. He creates help from the magic power. He is named Justice. Magic Justice will attack the negative aura and black magic of every creature around him. All the monsters that attacked the Wilburg Kingdom finally disappeared instantly. The justice magic also injured even Kreist, who controlled the monsters from a great distance. As a result of this victory, Saiichi increased his power level to a very high level. Seeing that, King Wilburg and Barnabas felt proud of him. Barnabas then asked Saiichi to become a magic teacher at Babador, where Saiichi's classmates did the training. Although at first he hesitated, Saiichi finally accepted the offer. A few days later, when Princess Louise returned to the Wilburg Kingdom, Saiichi said goodbye to her, because he would leave the Wilburg Kingdom and start teaching at the Barbador Academy. On the other hand, the demon lord trapped in the crystal ball forced Kreist to resurrect him immediately. One of the Demon King commanders then suggested that Kreist gather the energy of despair from the Barbador Academy. Meanwhile, Saiichi and his adventure friends are already getting on the train to head to Barbador Academy. They said goodbye to all the guild members from the Wilburg Kingdom countryside and immediately headed for the academy. At the end of the anime, it is shown that Saiichi's level of power has increased tremendously since he came to the fantasy world for the first time. The moral that we can learn from this anime is if you have fat and smelly friends or relatives, never underestimate them. We never know if they will become handsome and meritorious heroes in another world.